Welcome to the 359. I'm Joni Salzman, and I am joined remotely this morning by our own Maggie Reardon. Maggie, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
So as we're taping right now, the former fixer and lawyer to President Donald Trump is testifying to Congress, and Wikileaks is rearing its head. Last night, Michael Cohen's prepared statement claimed that Trump was aware that an associate, Roger Stone, was in contact with WikiLeaks about the release of a trove of hacked emails from the Democratic National Committee. So, Maggie, the Trump presidency has faced a lot of questions about what the president knew, when, during his campaign. If this claim is true, how big of a deal is that? The idea that he knew that an associate was in contact with WikiLeaks?
It's a really big deal. I'm not a lawyer, but this is illegal activity, right? So the whole WikiLeaks stuff, that's trafficking stolen information from people's emails. So, anybody who knew about it and was a party to distributing that information, that's criminal activity. So right there, a crime has been committed.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a big deal.
There are questions, too, about Michael Cohen. He's testifying before Congress, before going to prison because he lied to Congress. So how skeptical do we need to be about what he is telling Congress now?
Well, and that's clearly what the White House has been saying is like, this guy has already been out there. He's a known liar, so how much of it can you really believe? It's hard to say. I don't know.
And to be fair, and WikiLeaks has also come out and said that that Michael Cohen's statement is untrue. WikiLeaks itself has denied it. So there's a lot of questions still, even as we get more information. Well, there seems to be a greater appetite in the U.S. government to take on tech's bad behavior. Yesterday, the Federal Trade Commission said it would create a technology task force that would look into competition in the tech industry. Maggie, how does this fit into D.C.'s attitude towards Silicon Valley lately?
Well, I think we've seen over the past year or so that politicians, policymakers, everybody wants to clamp down a little bit more on Silicon Valley, right? A couple of years ago, these companies were really like sort of the golden children of DC, right? Everybody loved the tech companies, and now everybody's a little bit more skeptical. So I think what we're seeing here is, this really should be oversight of the FTC under, what we see in terms of current law. But I think there's been a lot of skepticism that the agency is really up to the task to handle it. They aren't just focused on Facebook and tech companies, but They have to oversight over like all consumer goods and stuff. So, I think this commission is trying to show that they're going to beef up a little bit on their antitrust stuff, and that they're going to focus and get some real expertise in there to look specifically at these companies. But, I still think that there's some skepticism. I think that there are some consumer groups who are saying they don't think it's enough, that we need other kinds of reform and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, yesterday, the U.S. government lost its appeal, hoping to unwind AT&T's giant $85 billion merger with Time Warner, which is the parent of TV networks like HBO, CNN, TBS, things like that. That means the two companies have no real hurdles to keep themselves from completely intertwining. Do you have any sense about how AT&T might try to ingrain Time Warner with its services now that there's nothing holding them back, no more questions?
Well, they've already been doing it, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be coming out with services. That you're covering what they're up to. So this really was kind of an annoying thing that was cloud hanging over them. And now that I think that it's all cleared up, they just feel like they can kind of move full throttle. One of the big things here is like the government's not going to appeal. So this is not anything that's going to have any chance of going to the Supreme Court.
That's us for today. I'm Joni Salzman with Maggie Reardon. Thanks again, Maggie.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for listening.
really got to start making a better effort on coordinating the soundtrack, because that was very inappropriate segue music. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Go ahead and start sending in questions and comments. I know these are hot topics. We're not trying to politicize anything. This is really about the impact on the tech industry, how WikiLeaks plays in, how Time Warner and AT&T are just going to bogart everything now. But yeah, go ahead and start chiming in. We'd love to hear from you, no matter what your stance is. So yeah, send them on. Right out the gate, Maggie, can you further explain what the leak in question was in regards to that first story? Jamie Cook wants to know this one.
What do you mean the leak? What were the WikiLeaks?
So what are the current? I mean, what is the WikiLeaks in question in this case? Like, what information was leaked?
Oh, so this was the Podesta emails, right? So basically, the FBI's basically said that they found that Russian hackers got information from John Podesta's email, and then that was sent to WikiLeaks, and then apparently Roger Stone, or at least according to what we know from what the government's saying, Roger Stone was in communication with WikiLeaks about when to release those emails and how it would be more advantageous to the campaign. And apparently what Michael Cohen is saying is that President Trump knew about this as well. And again, as Joan and I discussed, like, you know, the White House is saying, look, he's a liar. He's a known liar. We're denying this. So, you know, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what else comes out. I mean, every day it seems like new things are coming out from the Mueller investigation. So we'll have to see.
Coming next up, let's take one from our old friend Michael Brown. My question is, what difference does it make that Cohen is testifying or releasing a live action, quote unquote, tell all at this point?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't think it really matters so much to the Mueller case. I think what it matters to the American people. You know, I think there's a real question about whether that report from Mueller is going to be released publicly, right? Because we're going to have a new AG, and he probably isn't going to make everything public. At least that's the feeling amongst a lot of experts here. So this is really a chance for policymakers and basically Democrats to grill him and try to get this information out to the public.
Got it. Here's a good one from Steve Cass. Is this the road that will end net neutrality? Can AT&T be trusted?
That's a great question. You're an expert on net neutrality.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. You know, I don't know if this in and of itself is sort of the end to net neutrality, but I think this is really, I think this decision is definitely going to pave the way for bigger mergers, right, Joan? I mean, don't you think that it's going to be, we're going to see a lot more of these broadband wireless companies combining with some of the movie studios and entertainment companies?
Yeah, it's been a really popular trend, kind of consolidation trend of tech or media deciding they want to kind of cross-pollinate and buy one or the other. So like AT&T buying Time Warner. Before that, you had AT&T buying DirecTV, right? You have Verizon buying Yahoo and AOL and making that into a media thing. So it's part of this trend that we're seeing of these companies that either are behemoths in tech or are behemoths in media, finding ways to kind of participate in the other's sector. And that definitely does, you know, raise, like when you're talking about paid prioritization and things like that, media and video are one of the most kind of traffic heavy things that occurs on the internet. So there are, it certainly raises some questions about what kind of exploitations could they do.
And I think as you get these companies that control your access to the internet, and now they own the content, so they're directly competing with Netflix and all these other companies, it does raise a lot of questions about, like, how are they going to exert that power? You know, the other thing to kind of keep an eye on here is there's another big merger brewing, the Sprint T-Mobile merger. And if those companies combine, you know, are we going to see them go after some content too?
And T-Mobile's gone after some. Like, didn't T-Mobile buy? They bought that television, that like high-end television service that's very niche. Do you remember the name of that? I can't even remember. Do you remember the one?
I can't remember the name of it either. But I mean,
Yeah.
right now, I don't think that they've said that they're not really going to go. Like AT&T is kind of the extreme at this point in terms of the wireless companies, right? Even Verizon is kind of backing away a little bit from the content game, but
yeah.
I think they're all going to end up there.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and take that around the horn then. Ricky B wants to know if this is going to have any impact on the T-Mobile and Sprint merger.
Well, that's very interesting. I was just reading a research note from a really smart analyst who I like to check in on a lot of this kind of stuff. This guy, Blair Levin, and he seems to think that this might be a bad thing for the T-Mobile Sprint merger, because he thinks that that in terms of antitrust is a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
It's a merger between companies that compete with each other, whereas the Time Warner AT&T merger was what they call a vertical merger, and that's, they don't compete, but the fear was that they would have a lot of market power together to then hurt their competitors and therefore hurt consumers. But so Blair seems to think that if the DOJ has been pretty badly beaten up on this, right? Like, I mean, they never go to court and fully litigate a case like this, and so they lost big.
Yeah.
So he thinks that it's just going to embolden them to just like put the kibosh on the Sprint T-Mobile thing. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens. We've got T-Mobile CEO going out there saying that he's very confident the deal is going to close. So, time will only tell. We should know in the next few months.
So the perspective is the idea that the DOJ went whole hog trying to stop AT&T and Time Warner, and since they're already going whole hog, they might as well just keep going that direction. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and I think that like they're going to be, they seem to not like this idea of consolidation, right? If they're not really in favor of vertical consolidation, how can you argue that they'd really be in favor of this, what appears to be direct
competitors,
horizontal consolidation? And, also the DOJ, let's not forget, like in 2011, they already put the kibosh on a similar deal between AT&T and T-Mobile. So it's not really, I mean, going into this, it seemed like it was going to be a bigger hurdle for T-Mobile to get the deal done. So we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, their whole thing is that they say, well, we can't get 5G everywhere, and we can't get it there really fast unless we combine with Sprint. And everybody in DC has their knickers in a knot that, China's going to beat us to 5G. So
we'll Interesting.
Yeah.
I want knickers in a knot on a T-shirt. I actually want to talk a little bit more about this, the tech. What was it? What did you call it?
Oh, the task force.
Task force. Tech task force. This sounds like an interesting proposal and like a long time coming, and frankly, maybe severely overdue. Do we know any specific names that are going to be involved in developing this or participating in it?
I don't think so.
It might just still be that early. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I think that there are some big antitrust people. I mean, not anybody that like tech folks would be like, oh wow, that person's involved. No, this is
no
like
major
really,
celebrity.
No, it's more like some hardcore antitrust lawyers.
Gotcha.
But there's a lot of debate going on, because there are a lot of people who think that what we really need is like some overhaul of the antitrust law. And that it's not really sufficient to deal with what we've got here. There's some talk of like, are we going to unwind some of these companies and make them spin off some of the companies that they've acquired, basically undo some of the mergers. That's really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
So, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how far things go here and which sort of camp wins, and you're seeing it kind of play out in Congress too. You've got like Senator Warren of Massachusetts, who seems to be more of the staunch, she'd like to see some of these companies broken up. And then you've got Senator Warner So we got
Right.
Warren and Warner of
Right.
Virginia, who's like maybe a little less extreme. So, but the big question is like, is Congress going to do something? And it
Right.
seems like they're certainly having enough hearings. They should do something, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
This Congress, anyway. Nothing gets done in this Congress.
Let's talk a little bit more about the mergers. Storm King is asking why would it specifically be bad for T-Mobile and Sprint to merge. I would like to kind of open that up and make it a little bit easier to summarize as to what are some of the dangers that we could see with these new mergers that are on the horizon between AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, Time Warner, T-Mobile, Sprint, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it's T-Mobile
Okay.
and Sprint. Like the obvious downside for consumers is if you have less competition, that opens up the possibility of there being less reason for them to have lower priced options or services.
Right,
If there's
like-
less competition, there's less reason for them to be competitive for your
Right.
business.
Right now we have 4 major U.S. carriers. If Sprint and T-Mobile merge, you're going to only have 3. They're going to all, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile are all going to roughly be about the same size. I think the fear is that when you've got 3 big companies like that, it's a little easier for them to kind of just, not necessarily, outright price fix, but they can follow each other a little bit more. So you won't see the aggressive pricing and the aggressive kinds of things that you've seen T-Mobile doing, right? Even though T-Mobile says, no, it's in our DNA, we're totally going to still be like the maverick in the industry. But
Right.
really, there's less of an economic incentive to do that. And then with all the other companies, I mean, it's this whole idea of, again, coupling your access to the internet with the content that you see. And, as someone mentioned earlier, it is sort of a net neutrality issue. And what do those companies that own your access to the internet, do they act as gatekeepers, and do they sort of shut down the competition and sort of in a very sneaky way keep out new players? I mean, like
Yeah.
there's some stuff people are talking about, like even 0 rating, which everybody, like, who doesn't like to get free content, right? But there are now studies coming out that, like, in Europe, in places where they've tried this in other parts of the world, that they're seeing actual price increases because you really don't get anything for free. Somebody bears the cost somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was sitting on this one till last because I think this might take a second to digest, but it's a great question coming in from Michael Brown again. Can we get a short breakdown summary of factual instances of the loss of net neutrality actually being a bad thing? Now, digest that for a second.
Okay.
This is all Maggie.
The loss of net neutrality. Well, there are a couple reports that have come out that have said that there have been instances of throttling. I mean, I don't think that we're seeing widespread abuse right now, but I've sort of always predicted that this isn't going to be something that you wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden you're seeing your ISP doing like really crazy things, and you're suddenly not able to access your favorite websites, or the prices go up 50%. Like, we're not going to see something like that. This is really going to be a chipping away over time. I think that's the real fear here. So I've always likened it to, I'm old enough to remember when cable TV first came out, right? Like, ooh, it was a really big deal when we got to watch MTV. So, and I, that was when I was a kid, I have to say. I mean, I'm not old enough to be paying for cable TV.
Not that old.
Yeah, I'm not that old.
She's super smart, so it seems like she's been around forever, but she's not that old.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I take good care of my skin, But anyway, I think what we've seen in that evolution is, people went from not having access to cable TV to now, like, I think the latest, it's like 90% of the country can get access to cable TV, right? And now what that means is, like, you have this curated access to content that and very few people are still watching things just sort of over the air. And so now you've got someone curating what you can get access to. And I think the fear here is that if you have a broadband company that controls the pipe, essentially, or the airwaves into your home, like, are they going to over time curate and control what you see? And again, I don't think it's going to be something we see overnight. It's just sort of a slow chipping away, and some of it people will like the 0 rating. Like, it seems like it's cheaper. I get some things for free. Maybe I get a lower cost service, but I get access maybe only to AT&T's content as opposed to getting sort of the whole breadth of the internet. And that's where I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and make sure that that things don't go down that road, But it seems like the American people, their voices are being heard. Like, policymakers are hearing them. The courts and policymakers and a lot of folks are saying, like, they recognize now the danger that these companies could be too powerful. And now they just need to really come up with a set of rules that everybody can live by. So we'll see if that actually happens. Because again, like I said, nothing gets done in Washington, it seems like, these days. So
you could question that historically.
Right.
Well, that was a refreshingly dense day of conversation. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. And thanks, Maggie, for joining us. We're going to have
thanks,
Cyber
Maggie
back on the show sometime soon.
Yeah, this is really fun. And please excuse, the mess of my office. This is my home office. So it doubles
great.
as, other things. So.
Well, thanks again, everybody. Joan, let's go ahead and say goodbye because we actually are not going to have a show tomorrow. Pretty much the entire news team is on assignment, and 90% of them are on assignment right now. Joan fell on her sword to be on the show today, but she's going to be busy tomorrow, so we won't have a Thursday show, but we will be back on Monday. So we hope everybody has a good weekend, good rest of your week. We'll see you next week. Joan, take us on out of here.
Sure. The 359 is available on iTunes, TuneIn, FeedBurner, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, the Amazon Echo, and of course, CNET.com. We'll see you next week.
Take care, folks, and bye, Maggie.
Bye.